Are you a serious dinosaur model collector, tired of wasting money on inferior models that have design flaws and inaccuracies? If so, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 2 of the Dinosaur Review Show. Today we are going to review the Microraptors. In episode 1, we reviewed the
Archaeopteryx.
And so at the end of today's video, you'll have a great overview of all the avian dinosaurs that exist on the market today. So George, what is the fossil record that we're dealing with on the Microraptors?
So really good. Microraptor has been discovered with perfect preservation. So we have a lot of information on these little guys, especially since they come from the Liaoning Formation in China, which preserves not only their skeletons, but their feathers.
Was there not controversy around the first skeleton that was found?
Microraptor was initially found. It was described as a four-winged dinosaur, which is kind of a misnomer. A lot of people in the scientific community considered it fake, but more studies have been done, and the second pair of wings are actually its legs.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It had a set of feathers that connected alongside the back of its legs, which it's divided between the scientific community whether it used these for flight or gliding. But if anything, we do know these will look beautiful.
So before we jump into the models, George, are there any specific things that we should be looking for?
Yes. So one of the key things we want to look for is what makes Microraptor. And in this case, it's going to be the feathered legs. So I'll be looking at the legs specifically. Also, their feathers, because we have so much evidence on them.
Great. Let's get started. This is the Safari LTD model.
First thing that strikes me on this guy is just look at how sleek it looks. The aerodynamics on the wings, as well as the legs. See, they're bent back. A lot of times you'll see the legs splayed out, as we mentioned earlier with the initial scientific discoveries of it being a four-winged dinosaur. I do like the coloration. They have been confirmed to be black, but with an iridescence. So they did get the black part there. They've got the two-sided tail, which is a neat little detail that was preserved. We've got the raptor-like claw at the bottom. Very, very important for our Maniraptorans. That's the family of dinosaur that we're dealing with today. The teeth are present there. Very important because these guys were not birds. They were still dinosaurs at this time. So I would say this one's a pretty solid figure. Texturing on the wings is my favorite, honestly. This does look like it could pop out and just start gliding around everywhere. I almost said flying, but we have no evidence that they could fly yet. They had no breastbone for flight muscles like birds do today.
Which one would you like to look at next?
Let's look at this little guy. Where's he from?
He is the CollectA model.
Wow. The first thing that pops to me is the iridescence. This makes me very happy because the studies done on their feathers showed that they had iridescent properties, which is a structural thing that some bird feathers have today. This dinosaur would have shone in the sunlight. I gotta say, I'm very happy with the inclusion of that raptor-like claw. I will say it is a little rigid. It's standing straight upwards. I do like a more natural pose, but maybe it's doing a sort of display, maybe a threatening display. You can see a clear difference in the feathers here. You go from ornamental or gliding feathers to more of a downy, fluffy feather near the center there. They do have the bifurcated tail feathers, which again is a very big detail, but the tail here looks a lot more like Archaeopteryx's than it does Microraptors. So I will say that is a big difference from the ones we've seen so far. The leg feathers are a little bit different than the arm feathers, which is very neat to see. Typically, I see like a copy and paste of the feather texture. So
his teeth are much more noticeable than on the last model that we looked at.
These teeth are definitely a lot more prominent. They were not this big, I will say. They were a lot smaller, but when you are dealing with toys this size, I imagine it must be very hard to make structures that are so small.
You mentioned that the previous model was flat black and this one is more iridescent. Do we have any evidence as to which would be more correct?
I would say this is more correct based on the coloring, but based on the legs, I would say the other one's more accurate. But this does make me very happy to see that they included that iridescent feature. So I really like this one.
Let's go to the next one, George.
So this one does come in two parts. This is the PNSO Microraptor. So these pieces attach. I love the pose on this. Very organic. It looks like it's about to land on a branch, probably jumping from tree to tree. This guy also has that raptor-like claw on its foot, If we check in the back, it does have that secondary toe facing backwards. The teeth on this one are a lot different because its mouth is closed, which is not seen in a lot of dinosaur toys. I actually prefer the ones with the closed mouths. Preferably they could open and close, but this is a more natural pose of its jaws because dinosaurs don't go around with their mouths open all the time, all slack-jawed and drooling. The tail is bifurcated, which means it's divided in two. This one took a more conservative approach on the feathers. It's a lot smaller than the other tail feathers we've seen, but I will say it is unique. The feathers all throughout the body are still very downy. I do like that separation between the tail feathers, the arm feathers, and the leg feathers. They are very beautifully splayed out on the leg as well as the arms. And this one is also iridescent. They've taken hues of blues and greens and yellows and really shows how much it would shine, especially with that gloss.
Why don't we go on to the final figure?
So this will be a nice little surprise. This is also from PNSO, but it is a smaller Microraptor, true to its name. A Microraptor, if I may add.
Nice.
So this guy, very similar paint scheme to its bigger counterpart. The one difference, though, is the crest. See, this one's yellow. On the other one, it was purple. So I like that little distinction. Maybe this is a little juvenile that you could pair together. The claws are consistent with the bigger figure, although I will say that there is no distinction on the paint between the claws and the fingers. Also, the tail, it is still bifurcated, which is a nice detail. Honestly, I would say this is a pretty cool one, especially look at this throat coloring. A lot of reptiles and birds have coloration on their throats to use as a display, either for mating or for intimidation, and very neat to see that on a dinosaur figure.
So George, now that we've looked at the individual figures, let's say money is no object. Which figure would you go with?
I would go with this guy here.
The CollectA figure?
This one, the color makes me really happy. The tail is very beautiful. There is a separation between the types of feathers on the legs, the arms. They even textured the hands to have scales, and everything is individually painted. Everything from the eyes, the claws, the mouth, the teeth. I would say this is my pick.
All right. That is the CollectA model, and that is very similar in price to the PNSO model. Now, George, let's say money is a consideration, as it is to most of us. The Safari LTD and the PNSO Mini Raptor are about a third of the cost of the other models. Would you find those acceptable at those price points, or would you avoid them?
I would find that completely acceptable. I like myself a good bargain. Out of the two, that's a really tough decision. But I would probably pick the PNSO one, mostly because I do like the coloration on it, and it's just such a unique, dynamic pose. So this will be my pick for the budget option, especially that gloss. It really makes it shine.
And let's go back and combine episode 1 and 2. If you could only buy one feathered dinosaur, would it be one of the Archaeopteryx, or would it be one of these Microraptors?
I would say one of the Microraptors. And if you had to choose one between both groups, then my choice would be the larger PNSO. There is no better example of feathers on a dinosaur than this guy right here. Not only do you get a beautiful wing spread, but also that pose of it going to land like on a tree branch is magnificent. So this would be my choice if I had to pick one out of both groups. This would be it.
That's an interesting conclusion because it doesn't win the Microraptor category, but it wins the best overall feathered dinosaur award. Do you still have unanswered questions on any of these models, or do you disagree with our conclusions? If so, check out below to find out how you can be notified of our live stream question and answer sessions. After certain episodes, we will put George on the hot seat to answer any additional questions or defend himself if you disagree with his conclusions. Also, I have a couple of favors to ask. Of course, give us a thumbs up and subscribe, but also, if you could leave us feedback in terms of how we can improve this show. Do you want more detail? Do you want less detail? Do you want more of Kevin and less of George? Because clearly he doesn't know what he's talking about. Anything you can tell us now will help us improve these episodes going forward. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. And stay tuned for the bloopers. Is there anything else we're missing on the Microraptors?
There is one thing we're missing on the Microraptor. I didn't click record. Is that a total loss?
Oh, that's a bummer.
I almost said flying, but we have no evidence that they could fly yet.